Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our evening Dhamma session. Tonight we are doing questions and answers. And as I've been away for a while, it says 21 days. The oldest question is 21 days old. Which is, I didn't realize it was that long. So I was thinking, we had over 40 questions on the site, and I thought I'd get rid of some of them, but it turns out they're very good questions. There were a lot of very good questions. I did remove one because it was several questions in one, and I think that's not fair. I have to break them up, and I can't remember. The questions were a little bit scattered, but asking lots of questions about your meditation practice might be better suited for doing an online course or reading my booklet. But really good to see such good questions. So I was thinking maybe when I'm going away this weekend, I'll be gone for my birthday. But when I come back, I'll be back on the 14th. So after I come back, I was thinking maybe I could start doing one question per night. We'll see how it goes, but I had this idea to go back to the old way of one video, one question. And then so it would be a question that I would develop and talk about. I don't know if that will really work. A lot of the questions are not suitable for that, but there are questions that could be turned into a general talk. Anyway, something to think about. For posterity's sake, it's much better to separate them out because it's easier to find them. If you have all these question and answer settings, I can't imagine them being, well, they're not as useful. They're still, I think, beneficial, but it's nice to, anyway, you can comment and let me know what you think of that idea. So let's go through the questions. I'll try to get through them all, but that may mean shortening some of the answers. Some of the questions are only deserving a short answer, but we'll see how it goes. So this person is having some health problems and problems with their child's health. So the two things I pick out are closing your eyes and failing to concentrate based on the worldly problems. And your practice, you can't even stop the chain of thoughts. You can't even stop the chain of thoughts. You don't know what's happening to you. You want advice for your practice. So, two things. I think, first of all, understand that you're learning one important life lesson. A lesson about impermanent suffering and non-self. Coming to see that life is uncertain, and having to deal with challenges, having to deal with problems. The other thing is you're seeing your reactions to these problems. You're seeing how we create suffering based on our reactions, and how we're not really prepared for or able to deal with these challenges. The other thing is you're seeing, or the other thing to point out is that we're not trying to either be concentrated particularly, or being able to stop your chain of thoughts. So the other thing about this is a misunderstanding, a misconception about meditation. And these two things are related. When you start to see this about reality, you ask these questions: why can't I control things? Why are things so bad? What can I do to make things better? because you're seeing these uncomfortable truths about reality. So in Buddhism, we take a bit of a different approach to all of this, not trying to control, not trying to fix. The only thing we're really trying to fix is the way we react to these experiences. I mean, even that, we're not trying to directly change our reactions, we're just observing our reactions. And by seeing how much suffering we cause, and how unnecessary and unskillful our reactions are, they change by themselves. They change as a result of the wisdom. So about concentration, particularly, we're not trying to concentrate. We're trying to see, and even see how our mind is flustered. I mean, mindfulness is something you do right here and now. So that's another thing, is we often worry about the past. We get discouraged because we say, I wasn't mindful. That's not how mindfulness works. Mindfulness is one moment. When you're thinking about the past, you're not particularly approaching the problem in a useful way. Oh, I wasn't mindful. At that moment, why aren't you mindful, right? You can be mindful at this moment instead of bemoaning the fact that you weren't mindful, or that you've had problems or so on. So when you really understand mindfulness, there's no question of what should I do, because it's right now you should be mindful. Oh, I've had such a bad day of meditation, what should I do? What are you talking about? All that is gone. Just by saying that shows your mind isn't... I mean, it's a common, this is not something... Austin laughs because he's probably quite familiar with it. We all are. I mean, this is not something, I'm not laughing at you, it's laughing at ourselves. So it's something, this is a learning process, but part of the learning process is changing the way you look at things. No, you're not trying to have control over your mind. You're not trying to stop chains of thought. Just be mindful in a moment, and it's a slow process. It takes time, but the habit will pick up. You'll get more skillful at it. Okay, this is a tough one, I think. Myself keeps coming back. So make progress and experience non-self. So I experience non-self. Yeah, it sounds sketchy. I mean, you have to say it like that, but be careful that you're not identifying with that experience or with some experience. So I understand it on a deep level. Okay, be careful of conceit. And then all this emotional pain crops up, becomes overwhelming, much worse than even before meditating. So be careful about labeling things as better or worse. Emotional pain is just emotional pain. It's something you should note and be mindful of. I fear I am bottling up and repressing. So again with the I mean, you have to say it like that again, but just be careful. Because I am bottling up is just a concept. It's just something you think I am doing. What you have to focus on, the way to approach this problem, is to experience and observe the sensation of what you might label or conceive of as bottling up. Bottling up is just a reaction to the experiences you conceive. Oh yes, all of this together doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean you're bottling it up. It doesn't mean absolutely anything. It means experience. Emotional pain means emotional pain. It's impermanent suffering and non-self. When you can see it like that, there will be no ahankara, mamankara, no I-making or mind-making. How can I tell the difference between letting go and repressing? You don't have to know the difference at all. You just have to observe. Letting go comes from seeing things clearly. There's no way that you could possibly do the wrong thing when you understand the difference between right, when you understand the truth. Our wrongdoing all comes from misunderstanding. That's the Buddhist theory. Long question, but a good one. Let's see if I can sum it up. So yes, these two, I say that noting creates clear recognition of the experience for what it is without further evaluation or judgment, right? Strengthen the faculty of mindfulness. Okay, so other people say It's to build up momentary concentration, and then you give your supposition, which I think is correct, that mindfulness and concentration are related. Noting increases mindfulness, and once mindfulness is strong, it strengthens on concentration. I would say it a little bit different in the sense that mindfulness itself is a form of concentration. Or it's not really technically correct, but the act of being mindful includes, by default, momentary concentration. What that momentary concentration means is that in that moment your mind is healthy, your mind is composed. Composed is the sense of concentration or focus. I sometimes like to use the word focus better than concentration. Samadhi, which we translate as concentration, really kind of has the sense of same. Samma is like the same in English, we say same. Like Samma has the idea of being level, so not out of balance. So it's more like focus than concentration. And when your mind is in focus, you see things clearly. That's why samadhi leads to panya. So building up momentary concentration just means building up the habit of being mindful. And we call it momentary concentration to try to explain how it represses the hindrances, or stops the hindrances from arising. It's a temporary fix, but it's good because it opens up the mind to a clear awareness. When you stop the hindrance from arising, you're able to have that moment where you can see things clearly. That destroys the hindrances, destroys the defilement. Yeah, I get this question from time to time. It feels like you're being aware of two things at once. So I'll just cut to the chase and say the mind can't possibly be aware of two things at once. It's an odd concept. You can ask yourself, what would that be like to have the mind be aware of two things at once? It's a strange idea. It feels like that because the mind is just so fast. So I wouldn't worry about this question. If you feel that your mind there's two objects, just pick one. Doesn't really matter whichever is clearest, more prominent, or whatever is prominent. Can foundation and advanced courses be done back to back? Yes. Is it also a monastery? Yes. Is there the option of ordaining? Not at this time. Because we call it a monastery just because there's a monk living here. That's what monastery means. But we're renting a house, so we don't really have the facilities for ordination. Really, we just don't have the facilities for long-term residence. So it's just a matter of space. But maybe in the future. Question about what is immoral. So I say, no, it's not what I say. Read in a book that greed and okay. Is there something where I'm saying something? No, what you're saying. So you're saying, so the book says greed and desire become immoral only when it impels actions violating the basic principles. I feel like all greed that causes suffering is immoral. So again, it's what you mean by immoral. What that book is referring to is something called sila. Sila refers to your behavior, really. The word sila just means your ordinary or your normal. Sila literally means normal, but in this particular sense, it means what is normal for that person. So it means behavior, how that person acts. So if a person is dusila, it means they have bad behavior, or they're of a bad normal, literally. Susila or silawa means someone who has a good normal. So that refers particularly to behavior. So if you haven't actually done or said anything wrong, you haven't violated what we call sila in that sense. But there's another sense that it really is, you really can't you can't separate it in that way. And if the mind has unwholesomeness in it, then you have to say that, well, that mind is unethical or is unwholesome. We don't use the word immoral all that much, except in the sense of saying a person has bad behaviors, dusila. It's often translated as immoral, but it's not a very good translation. Immoral, yes, just like Jesus Christ said, and when you think the unwholesome thoughts, you're already committing immorality. We use the word unwholesome a lot more, because immoral is fine, actually. I would use it as a akusala. Akusala is all mental. You can't actually do anything immoral. The acts are not immoral in themselves. It's the mental intentions. When you intend to do something, that's the basis of immorality. But again, it's just words, and that's what that's referring to. Should I attempt to note all of my movements when we're working and moving at a fast pace? No. I mean, there's no should. If you're really good at it, if you've been spending years doing this, then yeah, you can be mindful of everything. But in general, try to be mindful of the 4 postures: walking, standing, sitting, lying. And the senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. Maybe the emotions as well, but beyond that, you can consider it all bonus, and whatever you can be mindful of is great. Does an Arahant still feel physical pain? Yes, still feels physical pain. But in the mind of an Arahant, there is no difference, in the sense of no judging, this is good, this is bad. Your other questions I'm not going to answer. Something about what would happen if you tortured an Arahant. It's not a bad question particularly, but moving on. Mindfulness isn't a great translation for sati. I said that. Did not offer an alternative translation. So sati, let's talk a little bit about this. There's a talk I gave at the 10th Global Buddhist Conference. Look up my talk on YouTube for a detailed. What's it called? Does anyone know? I think it's Wrong Mindfulness. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. Right? There we. Oh no. Mindfulness and Wrong Mindfulness. That's what the video is called. So I recommend watching that because that talk I really laid it all out technically, what mindfulness is and what wrong mindfulness is, if you want to understand what sati means. So mindfulness isn't a terrible translation, but mindfulness means to grasp the object as it is. So it's a firm state of mind that is not wavering. So there's a clarity there. There's a strength of knowing what the object is, and that's the sampajanya part. Sampajanya really means to know the object for what it is, but it's also a sort of a general sense of knowledge of things as they are. Sati is more, and again they're really intertwined, these two, but sati is more the act of recognizing. The cause of sati, which is in that video, is something called tira sanya. Sanya is the recognition of something. So when you recognize, hey, that's a cat or that's a dog or so, and that's sanya. But that recognition occurs naturally. You don't need particular mindfulness for that. Tira sanya means when you strengthen it, a strengthen or a strong recollection or recognition. So when we say to ourselves, pain, pain, we're creating this state of strong recognition, or we're performing the act of strengthening our recognition that firms the mind up and causes the mind to grasp the object correctly and well grasp, to grasp the object well. That's sati, is the grasping of the object. Literally, it means something like remembrance or recollection, and that's how it's used in other contexts, like remembering things a long time ago. That's sati. Something happened a long time ago and you can remember it, you're considered to have sati. But that's not at all what we're talking about in the context of the practice of mindfulness. We mean recollecting the present, recollecting what's happening, because we forget, right? We're not clearly and firmly aware of things. We experience something and immediately the mind is reacting and wandering and leaving it behind. Sati is being present with what's happening and remembering yourself, in the sense of remembering reality. How are we doing? What does it say? There's only 11 left. I think that's a lie. 30. Okay, we'll go a little quicker. Nibbana. I think I'm going to defer this question. Okay, that Nibbana is hard to understand. It's a cop-out, I know, but we're going to move on. And this one is a no. It's not necessary to find the root cause of each and every suffering in order to realize enlightenment. I don't think. Actually, I'm not sure. Was that really correct? Root cause of each and every of your suffering. Actually, you may be able to interpret that as a yes, because the root cause of all of our suffering and karma is really defilement. I mean, we say craving is the cause, but it really means a reaction to everything. But either way, that's what you understand. And it turns out that the cause of all of our suffering is just one simple thing. And so yes, I guess that's really true. It is a yes answer. This is an interesting question. If wisdom is gained through experience, how can a monk or anyone become wise if they choose to abstain themselves from certain life experiences like sex and drugs and so on? So it's a tricky question, but it's not really that difficult. I mean, it's not the sort of experience we're talking about when we say experience. Wisdom is gained through experience. Experience all boils down to seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. We have what I label the building blocks of experience, the building blocks of reality. And those building blocks are the same no matter how you put them together. When you're having sex, you're still just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. That doesn't change. When you're on drugs even. The problem with drugs, of course, is your mind is it's a little more difficult, I would say. I haven't ever done drugs and tried to be mindful. That was well before my mindfulness days. But can't imagine it being it's more difficult. That's why alcohol is a problem. But yeah, so the experience we're talking about is just reality. I think that's fairly simple to answer. Here's a question from the Manual of Insight, which I think is the one by Mahasi, right? The big one. Someone's reading it. You probably shouldn't be reading it. Well, I don't want to judge you, but most people should not be reading it. So I would argue that this is possibly a problem with translation. I've gone through this many times, and I've read stuff. I never met Mahasi Sayadaw. And I've never read anything in Burmese by him. I have read some stuff that claimed to be by him, a translation of stuff by him that turns out was not a faithful translation, and I've actually hunted it down because it said things like this, where you stop using the noting. There's one really good passage, and I don't think I have it on hand, but it was really good, where someone asked him this, is it possible to practice without using a noting? I mean, I don't even know if this was by him, but someone sent me this, claiming it was by Mahasi Sayadaw, and it really made good sense. He said, yes, you could. You don't have to note, but we note because it's concrete. It's what you're able to explain what you are doing. You're able to be sure of what you're doing. You know, it's more certain, that you're actually being mindfulness. You're actually being mindful. If you just say to me, well, I'm just knowing things as they are, then how can you actually pin down that you're actually being mindful, and instead of just, reacting to things and so on? How do you stop yourself from reacting? It's a very ancient technique. I mean, it surprises people, I think unreasonably, but it's because we tend to have two different ideas of meditation. The one idea is this concept of, mindfulness, where this concept of meditation is just being a sitting and absorbing and learning, right? But we also know about this other kind of meditation that's very traditional, where you repeat something to yourself, a mantra. So I don't think mantra meditation is that unfamiliar to most people. But the thing is, there really shouldn't be this dichotomy. A mantra is a very good meditation tool. It's probably, I would say, the best meditation tool. And it allows you to be sure and to be faithful to the meditation practice, like consistently reminding yourself. So I'm not sure about that passage. I think I've looked it up, but I've seen him say that elsewhere, that you don't have to be mindful of everything, just note once a second. I mean, it's just an approximation. You shouldn't ever be counting like that, but it's a good sort of it's a marker or a measure. Approximately once a second is plenty. I mean, it's just a tool. It's artificial, but it's a useful artificial tool. I would say it's an important tool. It's not something you should ever throw away. I mean, the parallel is with samatha meditation, where you're focusing the mind. You don't get rid of the words, the mantra, until you enter into the jhanas. So in insight meditation, you wouldn't throw it away until you enter nibbana, because that's the jhana we're aiming for. Until you enter into cessation. Okay, so here meditating has less desires. Well, that's good. Feeling more nauseous. Is nauseous normal? No longer suppressing dukkha. Yeah, that's normal. I mean, it's not a long-term problem. I wouldn't worry about it. But a lot of different strange things happen because of the meditation. Nausea is a common one in certain stages. Lots of different things happen with the body. It's a good object, just noting feeling or nauseous. So here's one of these questions about, give me a place, where can I go? Mixed in with some discouraging comments about Siem Reap, which is Cambodia. And yeah, I mean, most monasteries you'd have a hard time finding support for your meditation practice. But I can't recommend anything in Cambodia. I don't know anything there. Ask around, Worst case, you'll find some strange meditation practices, but you might find some good meditation centers. I'm sure there are people meditating in Cambodia. So just ask around, keep looking. But don't automatically equate a monastery with meditation. Here's a speculative question. I probably should have just removed it. But I've had this question before. How can a blind and deaf person learn the noting technique? Because this person was actually, I think, had a problem. So we talked about it. And I asked, when they think, do they think in sign language? Like, do they actually have signs? And the answer was yes. So I said, well, then use sign language. So again, this points out how this isn't an ultimate reality. It's an artificial tool, but it's a useful one. I mean, humans have language, which makes for the ability to assign labels that immediately remind you of the experience that you're having, and keep you focused on it as it is. How can mindfulness lead to the development of the 6 other factors of enlightenment? I mean, so to some extent, you're not just practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is the best word to use for what we're doing, but it involves the other 6 qualities. And the Buddha said the other 6, you have to kind of balance them. 3 are on the side of energy, and 3 are on the side of concentration or focus. So sometimes 3 of them are going to be more beneficial, sometimes the other 3 are going to be more beneficial. But ultimately, mindfulness is the only defining factor. I'm not going to go into deep detail about how it leads, because it's kind of a speculative question. Practice meditation as I mention in the book, as I teach in the book, and it'll help you develop all these. Here's a question that, I don't know. The Buddha didn't say this as far as I'm concerned. Some texts claim that the Buddha said this. The eating of meat extinguishes the seed of great kindness. I'm pretty sure he didn't say such a thing, but other people would claim he did. So again, lots of different ideas about Buddhism. Wants me to talk about the monk beside the other 2 monks. So there's a 3rd monk on my shelf, the one on the right. His name is Jodka Bhikkhu was his name. They called him Lumpur Chano. And I don't know a lot about his story, but what I know is there was a very famous monk. He's not so well known anymore, I think. He's passed into obscurity. But he was the head of Wat Mahathat, which is a big monastery in Bangkok. So he was a very important monk, and he had studied the highest Pali. He had done the highest monastic studies there was in Thailand at the time. And so anyway, he became a very influential monk, and eventually he went to Burma, and I think he brought Lumpur Chano with him to Burma. I don't really know the history, but they all went at one point or another. Maybe he sent Lumpur Chano. But this monk did so many good things. He brought monks from Burma. He brought Mahasi Sayadaw. He brought other monks, Asaba, who passed away. But he brought the Abhidhamma studies to Thailand. He was responsible for creating the Buddhist university, I think, in Wat Mahathat. So the Buddhist monks started learning all sorts of university things, which, you might argue is not necessarily the best thing, but he thought it was good. Sent monks out to other countries, brought monks from Sri Lanka as well, I think, with the idea of promoting Thai Buddhism. And he got in trouble, and there were a lot of jealous monks and people who didn't like what he was doing. And they ended up conspiring against him and had him thrown in jail. Long story short, he spent 5 years in jail. During those 5 years, Lumpur Chano became the abbot of Wat Mahathat, I think. And by that time, there was a lot of the monks had been sent to Burma to practice with Mahasi Sayadaw under his tradition. And so they started up a Vipassana meditation center. And Lumpur Chano became the big head teacher of section 5, which was the Vipassana meditation section. He told stories about his practice. I heard a story about, that's not a relevant story, but he told stories about his practice in Bangkok and in Burma, and how difficult it was for him because he'd studied a lot. But his studies helped him give depth to his teachings. So if you listen to his talks, they have CDs, MP3 CDs of all of his talks, and I have them here, I think. It helped me learn Thai to listen to his talks, but so much information, Pali, and he's just a great source of instruction and theory of Vipassana. Like, they have thick books that they've transcribed his talks, or I think he maybe wrote it all down, I don't know, about Vipassana meditation that just goes into such depth. So much good information in it. So I consider him one of my teachers, even though I never met him. Hey, wait, didn't I answer this one already? Oh no, it's a different one. Okay, during meditation, focus well, good, everything's good, but outside meditation, you experience emotional pain. That doesn't arise during practice. How can you address this issue? Well, address it outside of practice. When emotional pain arises, address it then. That's fine. I would imagine that it will come up eventually in your meditation, but I wouldn't worry if it doesn't. Again, we're only worried about the building blocks. So when you get good at the building blocks, that will help you when you deal with this emotional pain in your daily life. Then you'll be able to be mindful of it then. To become a Buddha, you need to learn everything on your own. So this is a point of contention. Do you need a teacher? You learn from other people, but the point I was trying to make, is that being a Buddha, having a teacher is so insignificant to what you have to do. You have to really, learn everything. So you explain what you mean by everything. My mind is limited and doesn't understand that word. Yeah, it's not a small thing. Our minds are limited to even understand how the Buddha could know everything. Didn't know everything, so was able to gain the proper understanding of any question. So if he thought, what is the answer to this? The answer would come to him. He had unobstructed knowledge. It doesn't mean he knew everything all at once, because you can't know more than one thing at a time. But any knowledge he wished for would come unobstructed. Is it true that you have to learn everything? I may be overstating it there. You may have caught me on a misstatement. But I think it's a fairly accurate depiction of the general ballpark. It's a very, very difficult thing, and a very, very profound thing to become a Buddha. So if I tell you have to learn everything, it gives you at least an idea of the difficulty involved. Whether or not that's an actual proper statement to make, I'll admit it, I'm not sure. You don't need a teacher or a guide to become a Buddha. I would say you probably have countless teachers. So you just do countless everything, really. It's countless, uncountable, not countless, but uncountable. 4 uncountables. How long it would be, the amount of time that you can't possibly count, takes 4 of those to become a Buddha, at the minimum. What teachings do you recommend constant reflection and practice? So many vids and suttas. The Satipatthana teachings. You read my booklet. I don't know about constant reflection on teachings or so on. Read through the Buddha's suttas. Just keep studying. How to be free from desire in the mind without losing touch with people around me. Why do you desire to have touch with these people? To get in touch with these people? If you're free from desire, the people around you will definitely change, and which people are around you will definitely change. So yes, meditation, because it changes who you are, it also changes who you're around. You tend to spend more time alone as a meditator. So I don't have an answer for your question, except I think it's not possible. It's like one or the other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Okay, I take 2 meals a day. Well, eating only in the morning or eating less is only because we do less. and because we don't want to be greedy about food. But if you have to work, if you have to live in the world, if you're not really mindful, it's hard to eat only in the morning, you know. You get sick as a result, especially if you're working and so on. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the eating thing, unless you're also meditating properly. If you lose weight, that's not a problem. But don't worry so much about the food. If you feel like you're not eating enough, well, eat a little more, that's fine. But your question was also about the health and the worrying about health. And yes, that can be a hindrance. It can be a problem. Worrying about your health is not such a great thing. But if you're constantly sick, it's also not a great thing. It can be a hindrance to practice, especially in the beginning. It can also, in the long term, be a good object of meditation. It can stimulate your practice when you're sick. So there's no definite answer to that question. And meditation's supposed to feel as a perpetual awakening. If it is the object of meditation, to widen that awakening so it overpowers the thought. I'm going to just direct you to my meditation booklet, and if you've read that, maybe read it again. No, I wouldn't put so much concern about what meditation is. Meditation is just for observing things as they are, seeing things clearly. It's a fairly simple process. I wouldn't put too much, wouldn't overthink about what it's for. Speculative, I'm going to delete this one. Right? Yeah. I mean, they're not bad questions, it's just speculative, not directly related to our practice. Sanka has two good questions here, I think. This one's the first one. Can someone who believes all mental activities cease when the body perishes become a sotapanna? If yes, can a sotapanna person still be such a person? Okay. Don't use the word secular Buddhist, because it implies that there's something religious about believing in future lives or past lives. It's not religious belief. It's a different way of looking at this problem of death, which is equally valid, or I would say even more valid. And I've talked about why I think that is. But someone who believes that all mental activities cease when the body perishes. So such a person can become a sotapanna because such a person doesn't exist. So remember what we're talking about here. At the moment when a person, a moment of the arising of the belief in the mind that all mental activities cease when the body perishes, the next moment is not going to be the attainment of sotapanna. Right? You see how we have to look at this. But a mind that from time to time gives rise to such a belief can also, in between those times, give rise to enough wholesomeness to become enlightened, to become a sotapanna. Can a sotapanna still hold that belief? No. The sotapanna would not hold to such a belief. Such a belief is based on speculation, it's based on really a misunderstanding or an identifying of the mind as being a thing, as being a brain, really, or being activity of the brain, which makes no sense, especially to a sotapanna. So such a belief, not possible to be held. The difference between vipassana, mindfulness, and insight. Okay. So insight is a common translation of vipassana. I've already answered the one earlier about mindfulness, partly by referring you to the video, that earlier video. But I've already talked about that. But vipassana and insight, they refer to specifically insight into the three characteristics. So seeing that the things that we cling to and we perceive as stable, satisfying, and controllable are actually impermanent suffering and not self. Unstable, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. That's what we mean by insight. When you see that, then you let go of these things. You stop clinging, you stop reacting, you stop fussing with them. Is the Noble Eightfold Path only for noble ones? Okay, the Noble Eightfold Path, and then you ask about the preliminary path. So the preliminary path is what people like Austin are on, or all of us who come to practice meditation. We are undergoing the path. We're practicing. As we're being mindful here, we're on the preliminary path. It's worldly, it's mundane. It's what we do as we practice mindfulness. It's called the Pubanga Magga. Pubanga just means preliminary. But the noble path, there's no such thing as basic path. I don't think we use such a word. But that's the preliminary path. The noble path is the moment of attainment of enlightenment. So when a person becomes a stream enterer, we call that the noble path. That moment is a path because it's something that leads to something. It's the cause of the next moment, which is free, which is not only free from defilement, but is a part of a process that is never going to give rise to further defilements of a certain sort. That's a sotapanna. And then when someone becomes a sakadagami, it's considered a path because the next moment, the result of that, what it leads to, is freedom from more defilements. And then anagami and arahant there's a moment of what we call the path. It's just one mind moment. It can only ever be one mind moment because the next moment's already done. The result has already been accomplished. So it's really just a very technical term. I mean, it can also be thought of as the perfect moment when you've got all those 8 factors right. That's why it's factored into 8 things. Do we allow meditators to live and serve at the center? Yes, we allow one at a time because we only need one person serving at a time, I think, and we only really have room for one. So if you want to apply, let us know. Right now we have someone for 6 months, but if you want to come for the next 6 months, let us know. We can talk about it. You'd have to come and meditate first. Do at least a month of meditation first. Okay, about not using alcohol in food and drink. So if it doesn't make you, it doesn't affect your mindfulness. So here's the thing. The precepts are vows. They're not rules. You take a vow to abstain, and that means complete abstention. So you're not really keeping the rule if you're not abstaining from it. The other thing is that it's just a matter of degree. Okay, so if you take just a little bit of alcohol, it'll only impair your mindfulness a little bit, but it's still problematic. Now, if it's so little that's just in the food, then it's, you can say, well, it's not it's not a real problem. It's not a significant problem at all. But is it still a problem? Yeah, you could argue. I think it is a very, very small problem. I mean, if it's insignificant, so that on a cellular level it's not even going to affect you, that's really what the Buddha meant by, or the rules, whoever wrote these down, probably, if not the Buddha, then someone close to him, when it says, if you can't smell the alcohol, taste the alcohol, or see the alcohol, I think, no, see is probably, but taste or smell anyway, then you're not breaking the rule. So if it's gotten to the point where there's really no alcohol there to smell or taste, then it's fine. Yeah, so I know in food sometimes that happens, right? You cook food with alcohol. Well, by the time it's cooked, you can't taste or smell the alcohol anymore. On the other hand, there was this dish that they gave to us as monks twice actually, I think. It's rice that they put sugar in it and then they leave it out in the sun and it becomes fermented. And I was trying to explain to them that, there's alcohol in this. I tasted it and I said, there's alcohol in this. And they said, no, they don't put alcohol in it. Oh yes, why did they make it? And they put it out in the sun. Ah yes, well, do you want to know how alcohol is made? It was an interesting conversation. I actually embarrassed the donors because it was many years ago. I said, there's alcohol in this, right in front of the donors, and they were so discouraged. Amongst in the 4 Adipada and Dhammavichaya and 7 Satta Bojjhanga, I'm running out of steam here. How many left do we have? I don't know. You know what? I think I might stop there. There's only 11 left, and I think I had enough. So I apologize. I know some of these are 14 days old, but we'll get to them next week, I think. So that's all for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night.